Okay, welcome back. This is Chapter 3. So turn to page 153 and we'll go through the chapter objectives like we always do. So the first one talks about understanding the types of cell references. There's 3 different types we're going to be talking about. Creating named ranges, create and structure functions, use and understand math and statistical functions, date and time functions, text functions, financial and lookup functions, and then the logical functions and some troubleshooting stuff. Okay, so let's begin. They first talk about, at the very beginning, they talk about the cell reference has 2 parts. We've kind of sort of been down that road before. But, you click on a cell, it's the intersection of a row and a column. And so over here, for example, is, that thing. The first part, the column, is the letters and then the rows and the numbers. Okay, cool. If I was to make a reference, for example, to this, I'm over here someplace, and I want to talk to Kumquat Jones's grade, okay? So to do that, to make a cell reference, to make that number appear here, I would just hit the equal sign. And then I could type, right? I could type in, what is it, B4. Or I could just click on B4, either way. And you hit the button. So this is a cell, and this is a cell. So this is F7 is now being pointed to B4. Okay. Now that's a normal kind of reference, okay? Nothing fancy here. That is called a relative reference. And oddly, even though this says, without doubt, this says B4, that's not actually what's happening behind the scenes. What's actually happening behind the scenes is the machine is calculating the distance between this cell and that cell. For example, it's telling me that it's to find that cell, go up 2 and over 4. That's what it's telling it. Okay? So even though it looks like it's pointing directly to B4, that's not exactly how it works. Now let me show you what I mean by that. Remember we talked about this little guy here? This little autofill guy? Okay. Now up to this point when we were autofilling, we were just autofilling just numbers. Like we put in a date or something and it extended the date or put in a number. Well, now I'm going to grab this guy and drag it down. Well, you think, what on earth happened? Well, what happened was, the machine looked at that and said, I bet what he wants is, if this one pointed to B4, he probably wants that one to point to B5, and that one to point to B6, and that one to point to B7. That's why that's called a relative address, or relative cell referencing. It's because the machine interprets that to mean, oh, I see. When you copy one of these suckers, does it mean, do I want to literally copy some from that cell? Or do I want to infer that you meant to keep the same distance apart as you go down? Okay, that's what this is all about. And this is the normal technique for doing cell references. You don't have to do anything to make that happen. There's another type. I'm going to go over here. And so this time I'm gonna tell absolute addressing. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, instead of just saying B4, I'm going to put a $sign before the B and a $sign before the 4. Now what that means is, I want you to lock those things in so that the B column and the 4 row aren't going to change when I copy. So this is what's called an absolute. I'm going to grab that and do the same thing I did before. Okay, see the difference? This guy says, oh, you just literally want me to copy that, okay? So they all point to the same thing. Here, they point to something different. And there's some combinations of this. I mean, for example, you could go here and say, I want to keep the B part rock solid, but I don't care about the 4 part. Okay, so that means locking the B column, but let the row float. That'd be one way. The other way, of course, is the opposite. I could say B $4, which means I want to keep the row part, but it's okay for me for the column to do. By the way, if I was to drag this thing down, what am I going to get? Now remember, now I've locked the 4. Okay, I've locked the 4, but not the B. All right, so what do you think? It'll work just like the other one. Why? Because I was moving in the vertical direction, and vertical is the number ones, right? So if you lock the number ones, okay. Now let's try this one. Here I locked the B, but I'm allowing the B, meaning, you know, the horizontal. I've locked the horizontal, but I'm allowing the vertical to do. So this one is going to work just like that first one, okay? So this had no locks. This had double locks. This had locked basically on the x-axis. This had locked on the y-axis. And so since I drug it along the y-axis, this one didn't respond. Okay, so that in a nutshell is how cell references work. Relative, meaning the normal way, no dollar signs. Absolute, meaning no matter where this thing appears, if you copy and paste it a gazillion times in your spreadsheet, it's always going to point to the same thing. And then mixed is, I want to lock in one direction versus both directions. And we're going to do some more of these where it's going to make a little bit more sense of when you should do what type. Okay, so just hang on. Okay, on page 156, they talk about the autofill. And by the way, without a discussion of autofill or copying and pasting, none of this relative addressing makes any sense whatsoever. The only way it works is when you do formulas, okay? Without formulas and without doing autofill, this whole discussion is moot. All right, so right off the bat, I'm going to go here, and instead of, I'm going to make this thing like a shopping cart. So bear with me for a minute. Here's, instead of student grade, I'm going to do like a normal shopping cart where you have like an item, a quantity, a unit price, a total, tax rate, taxes, and total. Okay. Now, remember how you just light this thing up? I want to make it go away. I just right click and say clear content. Cool. Okay. So I bought some kumquats. I bought a dozen of them. And the unit price is, I don't know, how about $1.20? So now my total, okay, my total is, I'll go ahead and make this pretty. So my unit, I'm going to go ahead and make that a normal, I don't particularly like accounting, believe it or not. I like the normal currency one. Okay, so the total, which is also going to be a currency guy, is going to be equal to what? It's going to be equal to the quantity times the unit price, right? So that I'm not going to do any typing here. I'm just going to say quantity times, that's a little asterisk, unit price, and hit return. So there's 12 of these guys, and they're $1.20 a piece. Cool. Let's say the tax rate is 8.25%. Okay, so now my taxes is, I guess I shouldn't call that, I'm gonna have to call that like subtotal, right? Whoa, stop. Stop. Because I can't have two things called total. Okay, so taxes was gonna be equal to that times that, right? So this would be that times that. Okay, so I got $1.19 in taxes. And then my total is going to be equal to the subtotal plus taxes. Woohoo! Okay, so now we're cooking. Now that was an awful lot of, well, not an awful lot of work, but it showed I had to do some thinking. I had to go through here and figure out what the formula was for subtotal and what the formula was for taxes and what the formula was for, and I don't want to have to do that every single time. So I'm gonna go over here and we're gonna buy bananas, and we're gonna buy, I don't know, a dozen bananas. Let's say bananas are cheap. Okay. Now I don't want to have to duplicate all that. So let's do a couple more. That's not how you spell banana, but that's okay. So an apple. We bought one apple, and everyone knows apples are expensive. So this is going to be $14.50. Let's do, I don't know, an orange. And buy 4 oranges, and they're 25 cents a piece. Okay. Now, a couple things I'm going to do. One is I want to do that format painter thing. Okay, remember that? So, well, I'll tell you what. We'll save that for just a second. So what I want to do is remember, this is the formula. This is the formula, and this is the formula. And I want to copy those formulas down so they fill these other squares. So basically, all I have to do is just light up these guys. I'm going to go ahead and light up the tax rate and grab my little down arrow and go doink, doink, doink. Okay. Now, I must admit that the tax rate doodad didn't do exactly what I wanted. But hey, I got the second choice thing. This is, well, I'll tell you what. Let's just fake that. Okay, I'm going to grab this guy and drop it down and get that back to halfway normal. Okay. Now, that worked because my formulas were not absolute formulas. Okay? These cell references were just the normal everyday references. So when I drop this one down, instead of being F2G2, this one is F3G3, and this one is F4G4. Yes, you could have typed them all, but my goodness, that ain't the way to do it. Okay, so the whole point of this is when you do this autofill doodad, it really, really makes things better. Okay, cool. Now let's talk about a scenario where maybe it's appropriate to use absolute. So let's say that my tax rate probably doesn't change but like once a year, right? Maybe it might go years before the tax changes. So it's kind of dumb to go ahead and put an entire column full of this number in there. I don't want to hard code it. I don't want to go here and say times, 825. I don't want to do that. So I want kind of something in between. I want it to be a cell reference, but I don't want to have a gazillion of them. I want to have one of them. So over here in the corner somewhere, I'm going to say tax rate. And here I'm going to put 8.25%. Okay? Now what I want to do is, instead of having this being literal numbers, right? These are just literal numbers. I want them all to point to that guy. All right? So the idea is I change this one time and shoop, all the rest of these guys change. That's the idea we're trying to get to. So I go to where I want to go, and I say equals that guy. Cool. Now, let's grab and drag this thing down just like we did before. Boom, 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 boom. And he goes, wait a minute, 0. Why? Because this guy said it was K2. This one says it's K3. Well, I don't have anything at K3. So how do you make it say, no, I don't want the numbers to change. The K is fine. I don't want the numbers to change. You put a $sign before the number. Okay? Now I'm going to grab this guy and drop him. Boom, 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 boom. Ta-da! Okay, that make a little bit of sense? So the reason why I used absolute, or actually mixed, the reason I use mixed references here is because every single one of these rows pointed to one item. Here, all these rows, I wanted them to stay on the row. In other words, that, F5, G5, I wanted that row to be the one that holds on. Here, I didn't care about the row. I wanted always to be at row 2, regardless. Okay? So that's essentially how you decide whether or not you want to use relative addressing. And again, it all had to do with how you did the autofill. Without the autofill, you'd probably never be having to learn how relative and mixed addressing works. Okay, this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. We'll pick this thing up again in just a few.